When I bought my first house, I was only 27. I'd saved up for years, and even though it was just a small, modest place, I was proud of it. Moving in, though that took some adjustment. I'd lived with my parents my whole life. Along with 3 siblings and 2 dogs, the house was loud, always buzzing with life. But this was quiet, really quiet. That was honestly the hardest part about the transition. The lack of noise. Living alone felt strange, and at first I wasn't sure I'd ever get used to it. I'm sure anyone who's gone from living with family to living alone knows what I'm talking about. One thing I loved about the house was the tiny bee on the 2nd floor. Don't get the wrong impression. I don't even know if I can really even call it a balcony. It was barely big enough to stand on, and I couldn't even fit a chair out there. Regardless, I go out there most nights after work to take a break and clear my head. I smoked pretty often, but I hated the smell, so smoking inside wasn't an option for me. The balcony was twice as beneficial for that exact reason. I didn't even have to go outside or leave the comfort of my own home just to smoke. It felt like a luxury. I'll describe the layout of the property, so what I'm about to tell you makes sense. The block I lived on was pretty standard, with houses adjacent to each other, all the way down the street. Behind mine was exactly the same meaning. Everyone's house would be sharing a backyard, if it weren't for the 10-foot-tall fences designating the property lines from my balcony. I could see over my backyard neighbor's fence and into his yard. You could see the whole place, really. After a few weeks, I realized I'd met almost all the neighbors, except him. Come to think of it, I don't think I had ever seen him, let alone have a conversation with him. The guy never waved and never came over. I never saw him in the yard or at the bedroom window. Nothing. It was like he didn't exist. If it weren't for the occasional bedroom light on at night, I would have assumed the place was deserted. I guessed that there was an old person living there, since the grass looked like it hadn't been cut in years, and I never heard any sounds from their yard. And after another week, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to go introduce myself and at least put a face to the name. One Saturday, I walked around the block to his place, expecting to knock on the door and maybe make some small talk, but the house looked rough. Rough was an understatement. It looked completely untouched. The yard was a mess, overgrown with weeds, and the whole place looked like it had been ignored for years. The paint was chipping. Some of the siding had been scratched off and the walkway was stained. The doorbell was broken, so I gave a few loud knocks and waited. Nothing. I felt awkward standing there and started to wonder if maybe the place really was vacant. But then I saw a slight movement behind the window shade, just a flicker, like someone was peeking out. That was enough for me. Someone was in there spying on me, but wouldn't open the door. For some reason, I turned to leave, when all of a sudden, the door flew open, slamming against the wall, like someone had ripped it open in a violent rage.
I jumped back, totally thrown off. I whipped around and found myself face to face with an elderly Asian woman standing in the doorway, staring at me. She was short, with gray hair pulled back and a tight bun. Her skin was wrinkled, but somehow tense, like she was flexing her face muscles. If that even makes sense, her eyes were wide, unsettlingly wide. I can't even lie, I was pretty freaked out just looking at her. There was something off about her, like it looked like she was on something. She didn't say a word, just stared with no expression on her face. Eventually I cleared my throat and introduced myself as her new neighbor. After a few seconds, she said her name was Priscilla and gave me a half smile. And that was it. She didn't even ask my name, she just stood there watching me. I nodded and turned away, not knowing what to say. I left feeling more unnerved than I wanted to admit. I never heard the door close behind me, but I didn't want to turn around and get caught looking. Later that night, I went out to my balcony like usual, trying to forget about the strange interaction. At that point, I had no idea of the ordeal that I had just gotten myself into. When I glanced over the railing, there she was, that crazy-looking lady from earlier, standing dead center in her yard. looking straight up at my house. She didn't move, didn't call out, just stood there staring. It was one of those moments where you wonder if you're actually seeing what you think you're seeing. I didn't know if I should say something, wave, or pretend like I hadn't noticed her. It was one of the freakiest things I'd ever seen, and I didn't know how to handle it. I went back inside and told myself she was just a little messed up in the head and that I shouldn't be getting worked up over a harmless old lady. But it didn't stop there. The following night I saw her again, but this time she was moving from one window to another inside her house, watching me from each one. Although I pretended not to notice her, part of me felt like she knew that I knew she was watching. I was hoping she'd stop, but she didn't. She was still looking at me when I finished smoking and turned to go inside out of curiosity. I peeked out one of my windows about 20 minutes later to see if she was still looking at my house. To my horror, she actually was. I called my dad, and he told me that she probably had dementia or something, and that she was most likely just lonely or confused. He told me that I should actually feel bad for her. It was kind of hard to feel bad for someone who was borderline stalking me, but my dad calmed my nerves and assured me that she was harmless. A few nights passed without anything weird happening. I didn't see her in her yard or at any of her windows. I thought maybe my dad had been right, and was starting to feel glad that I hadn't done something drastic, that is, until one morning when I found a woman's sock on my side of the fence just sitting in my yard. I stared at it, feeling a chill run through me. This wasn't just her strange behavior anymore. She'd been on my property. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to confront her, but I was starting to feel like I couldn't ignore it either. I should have called the police right there, but I didn't because I didn't want to create issues with a neighbor that night as I was laying in bed. The doorbell started ringing, not once, not twice, at least a dozen times, one right after the other. I didn't even need to look. I knew it was her in my tired haze. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was more annoyed than scared. I got up, threw on a shirt, and went to the door, telling myself I just asked her to leave me alone. I told myself that I'd been putting this off for long enough, and it was about time I dealt with it. I have no idea why I wasn't scared in that moment. I still look back and cringe at how flippantly I handled the situation. I don't even want to say I was naive, but I can't think of a better word to describe my attitude to it all. The second I opened the door, she lunged at me. She ran, foul speed at me with a kitchen knife in her hand. Her face twisted in rage. She started screaming, yelling something about how I had taken her son from her. I barely had time to process what was happening. I grabbed her arm, managing to wrestle the knife out of her grip, and I pinned her down on the floor. She was easy to overpower, but that didn't make the situation any less terrifying. My heart was racing and my hands were shaking as I held her there and called the police. She was still screaming nonsense about her son and told me that she was going to kill me. At one point, she tried to bite me, but I wasn't going to let her go until the police arrived. It was the longest 5 minutes of my life. She never stopped screaming or squirming the entire time. When the police finally arrived, they restrained her and forced her into one of their cruisers. She screamed the whole time, and I could still hear her screaming, even after they shoved her in the car. I had never been more scared in my life. The police made sure I was okay and told me she'd be sent to some kind of psychiatric facility. I never saw her again after that. This incident still weighs pretty heavily on my mind and has definitely made me a more paranoid and cautious person. I ended up moving out not even a year later. Oh,